Hello and welcome to the EcoCast. Today's topic is supporting Microsoft-centric environments. You'll hear from experts at SolarWinds, Rubrik, and Druva. The EcoCast event series is brought to you by Actual Tech Media. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to serve as your moderator for today's event. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for all the hello and good morning messages from across the United States and around the world. We really appreciate those. We love the Actual Tech Media audience. So thank you again for your support. Before we jump into it, there's just a few things I want to point out. For those of you who've been on the event before, you probably know these already, but stick with me here for just a moment because we've got a really cool keynote presentation lined up for you, and then I'll introduce you to our expert presenters. So just a few more minutes here. First off, questions. We encourage questions. We are all former IT professionals ourselves at Actual Tech Media, and we know that it's tough to find answers sometimes. It's tough to solve your IT challenges, and that's the reason that we created this event series. So we encourage you to use the questions box. It's there on the left-hand side of your audience console, and we'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session with each of the expert presenters, and I need your questions for those. I want to help solve your challenges. So keep those questions coming throughout the presentation, and I'll be queuing up the best questions for the Q&A sessions. I also have a number of poll questions that I'll be asking you out there in the audience, and we appreciate your participation in those polls. Those help us to keep this event series running and give feedback to our expert presenters. I'll also be sharing the results of actually the first poll here with you because I want you to see how you stack up with your peers on the event today. We want this to be a social event, so you can tweet directly from the console on the bottom of your screen, and the hashtag will be automatically appended. And then finally, in the Handouts tab, we have links to all three of the expert presenters' respective websites, so make sure that you check those out. Let's see, prizes. Didn't talk about that yet. We've got 3 Amazon $500 gift cards, and I'll be announcing those after each of our 3 expert presentations. You must be live in attendance to qualify for the drawings. All prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. The full prize terms and conditions can be found in the Handouts tab. We will reach out to the prize winners after the event via email. We also support charities through the event series, and the charity we've been supporting recently in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club is the Diane Fossey Gorilla Fund and the One Tree Planted charity. You can download complete IT educational ebooks over at gorilla.guide. These are full-length ebooks, really educational, fun reads. And if you haven't checked those out, just put in gorilla.guide in your web browser to learn more. The hashtag for the event today on Twitter is ATMEcocast, and like I said, you can tweet directly from the console. You can follow Actual Tech Media and me, David M. Davis, as well, over on Twitter. Feel free to subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media channels. You can do that in the iTunes store. We've got our 10 on Tech podcast, Facebook, YouTube channel, and LinkedIn. All of those, or actually 3 of those icons there, the YouTube channel, Twitter, and LinkedIn are on the top right-hand side of your audience console. We post all of our latest and greatest content over on LinkedIn, so make sure that you follow us there. And with that, I'm excited to introduce you to today's keynote presenter. We've got another really cool presentation today from Mr. Ned Bellavance, Microsoft Cloud MVP, Pluralsight author, podcaster, blogger, a YouTube vlogger. Make sure you check out his series on YouTube. You can find him on Twitter. He's Ned1313 or nedinthecloud.com. And with that, I'll hand it off to you for a few minutes. Ned, take it away.
Hey everybody, this is Ned Bellavance. You can find me on Twitter at Ned1313, and I'm here to talk to you today about your data management strategy once you start migrating to services like Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Azure. As we move to a hybrid cloud model, it kind of means that the data that's been sitting in your stronghold, in your corporate data center, is now making its way out to the great cloud, which can make you feel like you're losing control of that data. Now, in reality, Shadow IT has been doing a pretty good job of moving that data out already, but now you're taking your own destiny by the reins and you're going to be using Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Azure. What can you do to protect that data? Well, I have three key considerations for you. Number one, identity and access control. The way that users get access to your data is by getting permissions to do that. And as you start engaging with a lot of different cloud services out in that hybrid cloud, you might have multiple identities to juggle, and that can become very difficult from an administrative standpoint. How do you make sure that you've turned off all the identities a user was using before they left the company? How can you tell if one of those identities has been compromised? That's a real problem. Now, fortunately, there are solutions out there that create a single source of truth when it comes to identity and add single sign-on capabilities, so you really only have one place to go when you need to shut down access, and you also have one place to monitor so you can detect weird anomalies in people's logins. Wow, that person in Canada is suddenly logging in from Tokyo? That can't be right. Might want to shut down their access. So that is one way you can protect your data, is not letting users who are unauthorized gain access to it. The second way is through classification and controls. What you really need to do is understand what's in your data. You need to get a catalog of your data in all the various different locations and then apply classifications to it. Some data is not that important. It could be public. Other is company confidential, and some of it has personally identifiable information, and that's a big no-no. So you can apply different levels of control to your different classifications of data. And having a tool that can do that both up in Azure and Microsoft 365 and down in your on-premises environment is going to be key. The last component here is proper protection. Not everyone knows that services like Exchange Online and SharePoint and Teams, they don't back up your data. They retain it for a certain amount of time after you delete it, but once that period has expired, it's bye-bye data. I hope you didn't need that. You need to understand what the limitations are of those services and layer on some kind of protection on top of that that gives you the compliance that you need from a backup standpoint. You know, do you need to keep it for 30 days? Do you need to keep it for 7 years? Being able to classify your data in the previous point and then properly protect your data with the same or a separate solution becomes a pretty big deal. And there are obviously a lot of vendors out there that are working to make that a reality. There's a good possibility that the backup software that you're using today may be able to back up Exchange Online and SharePoint, but maybe it's not, and it's probably important for you to check. So again, the three key criteria, the three key considerations I want you to keep in mind as your data starts flowing out to the hybrid cloud is: number one, you need to get your hands around identity and access management. If they can't get access, they can't do something with your data. Number two, you need to classify your data and apply proper controls. And number three, based off of those classifications, you need to properly protect your data with some kind of backup and archiving. So those are my thoughts on what you should do with data management as you move to the hybrid cloud. My name is Ned Bellavance. You can find me on Twitter at Ned1313. Thanks so much for your time, and I'm going to hand this back to David.
All right. Thank you so much to Ned out there for his excellent advice and insights. Of course, Ned is a Pluralsight author. You can find him on Pluralsight. You can find him at nedinthecloud.com, and you can find him on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to his almost daily YouTube show. I've just brought up the poll question for those of you out there who haven't seen it. I see many of you have answered the poll already. This is a multi-select question, and I will share the results with you. For those of you who selected other, not listed, that's 12 of you, I see. I encourage you to just drop your concern in the questions box there, and I will share your concerns with the audience. I want you to get your concerns out there, and I also want to improve this poll in the future. So just drop those off. I see some comments coming in. Thank you, everyone. All right, let me go ahead and share the results of this poll with you. And it looks like 45% was the highest response rate to any of these concerns, and it was related to security and ransomware specifically. So I don't think that comes as a big surprise. 36% or 45% said ransomware and security, followed by 36% said data protection, and 30% said monitoring and analytics, as well as 31% said data disaster recovery, followed by 29% cloud migration and hybrid cloud. So very interesting, very telling statistics. Thank you, everyone who responded to that poll. We do appreciate it, and it's very interesting to see how these concerns go up and down over time. So thank you for that. One more poll question before I introduce you to our first presenter, and that is, what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? I'll leave that up for a moment here, allow everyone to answer that one. All right, excellent. Thank you for all those poll responses. We do appreciate that. It's time to get this EcoCast started. It's time to kick it off. I'm now excited to introduce you to our first presenter. That is Mr. Leon Adato, head geek at SolarWinds. It's awesome to have a head geek on the event. Leon, are you there?
It is. I am here. It's always awesome to be on a EcoCast like this. We really enjoy doing them. So yeah, let's go ahead and get this going, because I got a lot of words to say and not a lot of minutes to say in them. So I want to welcome everyone to the 4 steps to bridging your journey to Microsoft Azure. And I have to say up front, this is a really big topic, and 20 minutes is not a lot of time to say it. So the best I can hope for is not to teach you, but to irritate you. And what I mean by that is that when a oyster is irritated, it does one of 2 things. It either makes a pearl or it dies. My goal today is to irritate you in a way that produces a pearl and not any other effect. So this is me, and the most important part of this slide for you to understand is that I've been working in IT for over 30 years. I've been focused on monitoring for 20 of those 30 years, and that, yes, my real title actually is head geek, and I took it basically without even knowing anything else about the job because the title was so gosh darn awesome. So what we're talking about here is what we're going to talk about is some stuff, like I said, getting us to the cloud and some of the roadblocks that are along the way. So here, what I want to focus on is that once upon a time, before we entered this pandemic nightmare hellscape, digital transformation was a buzzword, and it could mean anything, and people got really frustrated about it. But now that we are where we are, effectively, this means move our stuff to the cloud so that everyone can get at it. Everyone, customers, everyone, colleagues, everyone, coworkers, etc. That's really what digital transformation has solidified to mean, which I don't have a problem with. And most people have come to terms with the fact that this is a both-and situation where hybrid IT, having stuff in the cloud and also earthed, as my co-head geek Thomas Larock likes to say, on-prem. We're used to having it in both places. And the fact is that the financial numbers are clear that neither is going away anytime soon. Now, a lot of what we deal with, or not, is that on-prem virtualization is still around. The problems that we dealt with on-prem virtualization are still there in the cloud. The difference is that it's just way more expensive if you make those mistakes. So again, the goal here and the goal for you is to avoid those mistakes, because they really have larger consequences. And the last part of this slide is, of course, security. Oh my God, security, please, let's talk about security. We will. All right. The piece here that I want to make sure that we're clear on is that AWS is the first thing that you probably say when you talk about cloud, but Azure is where the workloads actually go. That's really what we're finding out, is that 63%, as that center tile says, 63% of our customers have chosen Azure over any of the other cloud vendors to put their actual production workloads in. Again, neither is going away. On-prem and cloud are still going to be here. And also, I want to point out that private cloud is the fancy term that you use to convince your executives to buy you basically on-site virtualization for all that stuff that needs to remain in a secure location that you have complete control over. But again, everything is still going to be there. Now, the survey results are pretty clear about all this. Our work as tech professionals is increasing, and we feel like we don't have the skills that we need to get that work done. The business also doesn't think we have those skills. And as usual, we don't have any money, we don't have any training, and everything is constantly bursting into flames. This is what we call Tuesday. I mean, it's just, this is the way it tends to go, right? But cloud is making it more visible, and cloud is, in some cases, making it worse. On top of it, the thing I'll say here is that last year at Cisco Live, back in the days when we used to get together face-to-face and actually, see people, one of the VPs at Cisco said something that I thought was just brilliant. He said, loyalty to a brand has been replaced by loyalty to an application. And that really drove home the fact that applications don't just support our business, applications effectively are our business. And so the move to cloud and hybrid IT really is only emphasizing this app-centric view. The hardware is becoming more invisible, if not ephemeral, and because of that, it's harder to get at. And because it's harder to get at, some businesses are really just giving up on the idea of monitoring it. That 23% there just makes me really concerned, because what are they doing? Okay, the next piece that I want to talk about here, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this particular slide, except to say that, to paraphrase one of our favorite movies, security matters, princess. Anyone who says otherwise is hacking something. Security matters for a lot of different reasons. It not only is audit and also compliance and also applying to standards and keeping yourself from getting, gajillion-dollar fines, but also it's just the right thing to do, isn't it? We just need to get it done. So I want to make sure that we're aware of that, and that security isn't just a single-phase thing. It's not cloud security or network security. It's holistic security that thinks of the entire environment. Again, that app-centric view. The point is here, almost everyone is already on this path, right? Everybody is already moving in some way toward the cloud. And one way or the other, you're going to get there. My goal today, in addition to irritating you, is to talk about how to get there with your data, your enterprise, and maybe even your sanity intact. And this is your map right here that you see on the right side. So let's start down this path. The first step, fundamental controls. There's one way to describe this. Lift and shift is actually lift and shift. Really, it's awful. Instead, I'd like you to think about it as monitor and move. Security needs to be built in from the start. Nobody ever said, hey, I think I'll just leave this unsecure S3 bucket and it'll be fine, just fine. And yet we see things in the news all the time about this. We still see things in the news about this all the time. Why? Because typically the person who's building the cloud environment is different than the person who's building the environment if they were on-prem. In the cloud, you've got a dev or whoever it is with a few clicks of a button, suddenly they have this magical environment with Active Directory and storage and all sorts of amazing things that usually would have taken a sysadmin, a storage engineer, somebody who had familiarity with how security controls happen in Active Directory and so on and so forth. And they would absolutely have a thought about how things went together, and the developer, the person building the application, wouldn't even necessarily even know those things were happening behind the scenes. And that's where we get into trouble. Because it's click button simple, we forget that the security that we get on-prem isn't necessarily baked in, it's the convenience that's baked in. And we have to be aware of that we still need the same levels of expertise in all areas of our migration or build in a cloud environment. Next step up, preparing to migrate. If you don't know how it's running right now, when it's on premises where the costs are fixed, you are in for a huge and an unhappy surprise later. You need to monitor, start or continue monitoring your systems now, well, to understand their usage patterns, the flow, and then translate what that's going to look like in the cloud, because controlling cost on premises is not the same as controlling costs in the cloud. See, on premises, what are your costs? They're going to be your hardware, your licensing, your power, your cooling. Those are the things you pay for on an ongoing basis when you're on-prem, right? In the cloud, the things that cost you money are your compute cycles, your storage, and the service itself. It just costs you money to have a SQL database. You just pay a regular fee for having that. And then on top of it, you pay for the storage you're using and on the compute cycles that that database actually uses. This does not translate, but if you don't know what that is when those things are basically free for you on the earth, then you're not going to understand when you get a $15,000 first month bill. And this is giving rise to a role that Corey Quinn calls, and I can also call, the cloud economist. This is somebody who has a grounding in technical understanding. They know how applications are built and what they're built on, but also has a head for finance and numbers and understands the financial implication of building at this tier or that tier with this level of service or that level of service and how the application is going to react. So that's all something to consider as you go. Next step up, monitor the cloud. Just to quote another movie franchise, Indiana Jones, if you trust the vendor to tell you about the stability of their system, you have chosen poorly. At the same time, access to the guts of the cloud is really difficult to get at specifically because that's kind of the point of the cloud. That's how it's built. Nevertheless, you've got to have mature, robust monitoring solutions in place that have been adapted to rapidly provide an independent, customer-centric point of view for your monitoring data. Now, sometimes that's baked in. Sometimes you have to build in some things. And this is where, just a little side note, if you hear the word API and you are not somebody who programs, please understand that APIs are not as scary as they sound. It's just a URL that hands you some data back. That's all it does. And they are wicked useful. They are also everywhere, and they are for everyone. So you want to make sure that you're aware of the fact that API data can get you the information that you need, and you don't have to work that hard for it, even if it's not baked into the system, whether it's the vendor system or not. Okay, last step in the cycle here. If you've been working in IT for more than 15 minutes, you know that there's always a build versus buy, an all-in-one versus integrated different points and best of breed. And I cannot, and I will not tell you which way to go because that is so dependent on your particular situation, your environment, your budget, your tolerance for risk, your tolerance for work, all those things. What I will say is that your decision on finding a monitoring and management solution is not what it seems, is not what seems easiest or most cost-effective to management or executives who may be involved in the conversation. The decision really comes down to what will enable staff to get their job done. Okay, most of the time, staff's job is not to be eyeballs that stare at screens, waiting for something to start blinking red and keep an eye on cost, cloud cost and cloud performance. So the days of that are over. You've got to have a system that can independently gather the metrics, understand the thresholds and trends, and then notify you when there is a problem or when something is breached. So what will allow staff to know that, how do I say this? What will allow staff to know that something isn't okay? And by knowing that they will be told that, they can focus on their other work. They can be comfortable knowing that if they haven't gotten any message, everything is stable. At SolarWinds, we call this making your weekend longer because you're not worrying or checking repetitively, to make sure everything's okay, because you know you're going to find out, right? You don't have to worry about that. You can focus on the other stuff. Okay. So hopefully I've shed some light on both the issues and the approaches that those issues require. If not, hopefully I've irritated you enough that you're going to check it out for yourself. And at this point, I need to sort of talk about, like, why am I talking about this? You know, where am I going with this? So this is a moment of shameless self-promotion. Yeah, we got to talk about SolarWinds a little bit. What this slide is telling you is that if you have it, we can monitor it. Everything from your routers and switches to your cloud applications to your internet-connected coffee pot to your IoT devices, all those things, they all get monitored. And more importantly, all the data fits together, because ultimately monitoring, regardless of which vendor you go with, but monitoring has two goals. First of all, to give you the confidence that everything is running the way you expect, and that if it's not, you're going to hear about it again, making your weekend longer, but also to help you understand how the tech level stuff, like compute, is affecting the business level stuff, like sales. That's what monitoring is supposed to do. It's not what monitoring has done. And again, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I know that lots of us as monitoring engineers have gotten lost in the weeds with the bits and the bytes and the bandwidth per utilization per second and all that stuff, and we're so excited about that, and the uptime, and, you know, that's all great, but it doesn't tell me why I haven't sold 30 pairs of the pink shoes this month when we sold them last month. Is there any, you know, reason why that happened? But monitoring should be able to do that. And our goal is to be able to gather information from every level of the environment to pull it together to be able to allow you to connect those dots. So what does this slide say? Because it's kind of an eye exam. It says we have a lot of solutions to a lot of the problems that you're probably dealing with. That's really what it is. We have lots of different ways to get your problem solved for you. If, on the other hand, your IT environment is perfect and perfectly stable, then you don't need us. And I'd also like to know what color the sky is on your planet, because I'm thinking it's not Earth, because that's not the world I've ever lived in. You want to check us out, SolarWinds.com, for more information. We also have a user group called thwack.com. Yes, thwack.com, like a thwack upside the head, because you got this great idea. It's 150,000 active users sharing ideas. Yes, we talk about the software, we talk about monitoring, but we also talk about important things like who the greatest starship captain of all time is. And also, hey, I haven't done an ACL in like a year and a half. Could you talk me through it? It's a great community to be part of. But if you're interested in any of the stuff I've been showing, SolarWinds.com is the place to start. And I thank you very much for spending some time with me. I am ready for all the questions that you have.
Excellent presentation, Leon. I just love it. Really cool stuff, and I love the Thwack community as well. So we do have some questions for you from the audience. If you have a question for a SolarWinds head geek, Mr. Leon Adeto, now is the time to get it in, because we're kicking off Q&A. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll for everyone out there in the audience. The question is, what additional information would you like about the SolarWinds solution? And so we'll leave that up. First question I wanted to ask you, Leon, is, and I really like this question, what are the most useful certifications to pursue for anyone who wants to get into cloud technology?
Right. So this is a question that we see a lot and we get asked a lot, because a lot of IT folks are looking to pivot their career, you know, into cloud. Obviously, it is the topic of the day, and I'm going to give an answer that you're probably not expecting. None of them. None of the certifications are the most important ones. What matters more is the skills. It always has. You know, if you're talking about being a network engineer and you say, what's the most important certification I need as a network engineer? Yes, I could say Cisco, but the fact is that if you can demonstrate ability, that's what matters. No one is going to hire you purely on the basis of a certification, and no one is going to refuse you, you know, purely on the basis of not having a certification if you have the skills and the ability to do the work. So what is that work? The work is everything that you do on Earth, just up in the cloud. You want to be able to build and manage and understand how systems are performing. You want to be able to adjust things when they're not performing well or we're not working. There's also, as I alluded to, sort of an eye for finance and understanding that picking, Amazon versus Azure versus GCP versus whatever, and this tier and that tier have cost impacts to it. Do I have to spend money for moving my data from on-premises up to the cloud, or is that movement free, but moving it back down isn't, and therefore an application that pushes a lot of data from the cloud back to a ground-based data repository is going to incur more costs than one designed a different way. Those kinds of things are what's going to matter more than a specific certification. And I apologize to anybody who feels strongly about, their cert because they either got it or they want it or whatever it is. But that's the way it's always been in IT.
Absolutely. Yeah, I thank you for being, brutally honest with us. It's really the skills that matter. It's not the certificate on your resume. So great point. Let's see. Next question. They're asking here, where are you getting those stats on training, budget, top monitoring tools, et cetera?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, so those stats that I was showing you a few slides back, that comes from the IT Trends report. That's a yearly report that asks basically what's top of mind for IT pros across both public and private sectors, across countries. And you can find it at it-trends.com. So you can find those stats, and it's been going for 5-6 years now. Something like that. So there's a whole range of data points and charts, which really, as an IT professional, are really good to bring to your management and say, look, the thing I've been telling you for months and months, it's true, and now I have, 3,000 people backing me up or whatever it is. So yeah, great. Thanks for asking that.
Got it. I see it right here, it-trends.solarwinds.com. You can download the report for free. Really cool stuff. I'm going to have to check that out myself. All right, let's see. Next question. I just got clobbered with an Azure bill for 1 month that I wasn't expecting. You mentioned cloud costs. How do I monitor for that?
I'm sorry, and you're not the only one. It actually happened to me very shortly after I started, playing around with the cloud, and I didn't realize I left something running. And that really is the problem. Is that again, we don't expect the costs that cloud is incurring because for those of us who've worked in IT for a while, they're not normal. And it's also not necessarily easy to find the screen that shows you what you're spending on an ongoing basis. So there is a free tool that exists, and I mean free like beer, not like puppies. So if you go to SolarWinds, if you just Google, SolarWinds free tools cloud cost calculator, you'll find it. But that's a free one. And what you do is you give it your Azure login and like your login information, and it will pull the associated data. Remember those APIs I talked about? This is how you can utilize them. It pulls using the API to pull in, and you can now see all of your instances, all of your workloads, and so on, and what the costs are down to, I'm going to say the day, although I think it's more granular than that, but you can know what your costs are at the moment. And like I said, that tool is free as in beer. So you just download it, use it, love it, share it with your friends, and that's it. We'll never send you a bill.
Very nice. I did that as you suggested it. SolarWinds cost calculator, and it came right up here. Download the free tool. I'm going to have to check that out as well. I encourage everyone out there to do the same. Sounds like a great resource, great free tool. Comment just came in from Sujat, said that SolarWinds is really making our life easier, and that sounds like the absolute best test for any tool or any company out there. So great feedback for you and for SolarWinds, Leon. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
No problem. Thank you for having me, as always.
Thank you to SolarWinds, of course. Check out, again, the handout tab right there, and you can find a link to solarwinds.com where you can try any of their products for free right there on the homepage. So make sure you check that out. And now it's time for our first Amazon $500 gift card prize announcement. That's going to Brian Bethelmy from Virginia. Congratulations, Brian Bethlehem from Virginia. All right. We've got 2 more gift cards to give away, so make sure you stay tuned. And with that, we are moving on with our EcoCast today. I'm excited to introduce you to our next presenter, welcoming Jaap Brasser, Senior Developer Advocate at Rubrik. Jaap, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Thanks for being on. Take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Today I'll be talking about Rubrik automation on the Microsoft platform. Before I get started, to give you a bit of context, what kind of questions you can ask. My name is Jaap Brasser. I'm from Amsterdam, so that's why I have the atypical name. I'm indeed a senior developer advocate at Rubrik, so that means I get to work on all the cool stuff, like all our SDKs and integrations and everything we do as a company. And I'm also Microsoft Azure MVP, so I'm very much into cloud technology, automating it, using APIs to make the world a better and easier place for all of us. So with that out of the way, I'd like to get into Rubrik, and in case you haven't heard of Rubrik yet, what we do, and then how the automation and cloud piece ties into that. So with that out of the way, so Rubrik is a cloud data management system. It's a software that you can use to back up, to recover your information. It's very easy to set up. It's open for automation. We have an API first design philosophy. So anything you do with our product, whether you're using the web UI or you're using one of our command line tools, everything is leveraging the API. And because of that, we're able to easily automate. We can ingest data rapidly, depending on what kind of hardware our software runs on. And the neat thing about it is that that we can instantly recover workloads. So what we do is, for example, if we're working with a VMware workload, we can just expose the backup as a storage volume and then instantly boot up the system. So there's very minimal downtime. Everything we store, send, or replicate, everything is always encrypted, both in transit and in rest. And something that's very important is that your data is always immutably stored. So our file system is immutable. I'm sure you've heard the news about ransomware, another company that got infected by ransomware. All their data is gone, and then also their backup data is lost as well. So we circumvent this by having immutable backups, so they cannot be modified, they cannot be destroyed, they cannot be encrypted, except the encryption we put on there. And then the last part, we also tie into all the clouds, but our favorite cloud is obviously Azure. And we can both use it as a replication point, but we can also use this as a place where we can spin up your on-premises workload and then run them in the cloud. So this could be for test dev scenarios or migration scenarios where you would do a lift and shift of your existing hardware into the cloud. So with that out of the way, we're going to dive a little bit into how we facilitate the level of automation by getting into the APIs and automation. So the way our product is structured is that we have a number of REST API endpoints, and we use the Open API spec. So whenever you want to run any code or do any API calls against our system, the first thing you do is you're going to authenticate. So there's two ways of authentication. Either you authenticate using a username and password and then you get an API token back. Or if you've already provided yourself with an API token, then you can use this token to authenticate directly. So this is the same process for when you're using the UI, but also when you're using our SDKs, plugin, or numerous automation tools. So what kind of tools we have, we'll get into pretty soon. Because our product works with APIs, it's also very easy for us to consume the other third-party APIs. So we use Amazon S3, we communicate directly to Azure, so we integrate in that way. Our APIs are also versioned, so we have different versions. We have internal, which contains all the non-versioned API endpoints. We have V1, and whenever breaking changes are introduced or new functionality is introduced, it gets moved to a newer version. So in this case, it would be V2. So we're always completely backwards compatible on an API level. Everything is organized in a resource-centric hierarchy. So everything is like /VMware, /Hyper-V, /Microsoft SQL. So it's structured in that way, and we also have we also use Redoc to generate our API documentation. So having an API first design makes it very easy for us to integrate and to build integrations on top. So the integrations we build on top are a number of tools. So we can integrate into IT service management platforms. So Realize, for example, but also ServiceNow. We have support for multiple configuration management tools. So a couple that are here are Puppet, Ansible. Another big one that we support is also Terraform. And then we also provide the automation tools, things such as PowerShell, but also Python and Golang. And everything we create, we in regards to SDKs or integration or configuration management tools, we have everything open sourced on GitHub and open for collaboration, but also for direct interaction with us to either raise an issue or to reach out to us when something isn't working as planned. So with that out of the way, let's dive into how we integrate with Microsoft. And our tool of choice here is PowerShell. So the reason we chose for PowerShell is because when we entered the market about 6 years ago, PowerShell was really the front and center automation tool of Microsoft. At this time, there was only Windows PowerShell. It was shipped with all versions of both Windows 10, Windows 8, but also all the Windows Server versions. So it was available everywhere, and it can also be used to directly manage Azure, because there's a lot of Azure modules available. And from that point on, PowerShell also developed further. So PowerShell is a language. It is an automation language. It's also a shell, so it can be used interactively. So whenever it's different in a sense from Python, where Python is more of an automation language, and PowerShell you can use in your Windows terminal or in your PowerShell console directly. And since 4 years, PowerShell has been open sourced, and one of the good developments that came out of that, or at least one of the ones that I find quite useful, is that when they open sourced PowerShell, and they as Microsoft in this case, they also used .NET Core, which allowed PowerShell to be cross-platform. So currently, PowerShell is available on all platforms, so it doesn't matter if you're running on Linux or you're running Mac OS. It's available everywhere. And this is a great benefit for us as well, because we can just develop a single PowerShell module which contains our SDK to communicate against the Rubrik platform. So a couple of things that we did there. If you want to get started with a PowerShell module and you're not familiar yet with how PowerShell works, there's a number of ways that you can get the module. If you're running a current version of either Windows PowerShell or one of the more recent versions of PowerShell, you'll be able to install the module directly from the PowerShell gallery using install module-Rubrik. Another way you can install the module is by using an installation script. So we've also provided a custom installation script that you can run locally on your system, and it will pull down the resources and install it on your system. If you're more familiar with Git, you can clone the repository. You can also save it locally using a save module. One thing to keep in mind whenever you're installing or saving a module to your system, it does assume that you have a direct internet connection available, which is of course not always the case for a server that might be behind a firewall or otherwise doesn't have internet connectivity. So another way to do it is to download a packaged version of the module or to package it up yourself, because it's just a single folder with a number of files that you can just distribute and copy over to whichever servers need it. So there's a couple of use cases that we have for this module. So one of the things that we do is we can use it for information gathering. So what we can do is we can either query what kind of data is on the Rubrik cluster. We can query if there's any failed backups. We can do advanced configuration options that might be harder to do from the UI. And by using this, we can automate and orchestrate our processes. So one of the things that you might be able to do is, for example, do a backup validation. So an important thing whenever you have any kind of backup is, of course, to validate that the backup is actually going to be available and is going to work the moment you're going to do a restore. And one of the ways you can do this is obviously by restoring whatever workload you have. So for this example, let's assume that you have a SQL database server, and you want to validate that the moment you do a restore of this server, that all your databases are going to be there. So a manual way of doing this would be to restore the server, to RDP into it, to verify that the services are running, and then connect using a SQL management console to validate that your databases are actually there and your data is there. But that's going to take a significant amount of work. So what we've done instead is we've used this module to create a framework, an extensible framework that we call the backup validation framework. And what we can do here is you can enter the information about your environment. So you specify the IP addresses of the servers, you specify the names, you specify the new network on which you want the workload to be hosted, and then the framework will do a number of calls to the Rubrik cluster. It will initiate a restore. Once the restore has successfully been completed, then it will wait for the operating system to be available. Once the operating system is available, then it will start running its validation tests. So in this case, we're talking about a Microsoft SQL workload. So the first thing we check is, okay, can we ping? Can we actually validate that the SQL service is running? So once it's running, we can run a number of PowerShell commands to validate, okay, are the databases that we want to be there, are they there? Can we actually query data from these databases, and is the data as we expect? And after that, if all our tests pass successfully, then we can completely decommission this environment, and it's as if the restore has never happened. The big advantage of using this level of automation is that instead of manually taking these actions, you can automate this. You can skip this, and you can validate that your most critical services are actually going to be able to be restored and provide a report that these services are actually going to be available the moment you are going to click restore. And nobody wants to be caught in a situation when the backups are actually required that something was wrong, and actually, even though it says all the backups were successful, it was in fact not successful. So that's why we developed the backup validation framework. So in the example I just gave, I specified a single database, but we can also extend this beyond what we have, what we've done in this example, where we covered a single SQL server. But we can also do an entire cluster with application servers running on top and validating every component to see that we could actually recover successfully after completing a restore. So this is one of the things that we've built on top. We have a number of other use cases that we've built on top using our different frameworks. But another example of what we've built in PowerShell is there's also a framework called as-built. And the as-built framework is a framework that can be used to see what your current configuration of your server or your environment is. What we've done there is we've built a Rubrik module inside of as-built, and this module will validate your entire configuration of your cluster. It will store it in either a JSON, an XML, or an HTML file, or an Excel file for an easy way to be able to access this data. And you can have numerous point in times where you can view this data and you know that, okay, this is how it's configured now. If I want to redeploy this cluster, reconfigure it, I have all the configuration settings. And one of the more fun things that we've built on top of as well is we build a bit of chat automation. So what we've done here is a lot of people are using either Slack or Teams as a way of communication for the team, for their teams. And our Slack bot is able to be pulled into your Slack channel or your Teams channel, and you can directly communicate to the bot and tell it to either recover a file or get information about the status of your cluster. And the big advantage of using chat automation is that you have less context switching because you're already in your chat console and you can get the information directly from there. So those are a couple of the use cases that we've built out. And with that, I would like to open it up to questions.
Absolutely. Yeah, great presentation. Yep. really cool what you guys are doing there at Rubrik. I like the creature there on the slide about questions. But we're going to have to move on to the poll. And the poll on the screen here for everyone out there is just what additional information would you like about the Rubrik solution? And I'll leave that up while we take some questions. So if you have a question about how Rubrik can help you to better protect your Microsoft environments, now's the time to get it in. First question that I see here that's come in is about building integrations. What kind of challenges or pitfalls do you typically see, and kind of how can people avoid them would be my follow-up question to that.
A couple of the pitfalls that we've run into is when you're building automations or SDKs on top of APIs, is to stay on top of the changes in the APIs. So one of the ways that we can do this is by following the change logs. But we actually ended up building a number of automated tools that we can use to track changes in our open API specs, so we can see whenever anything changes and rate it by different severity. Like if it's going to be a change in this on this level, then we need to do something with it, and if it's just a documentation change, then we will not. It will not be as critical. And how we handle it was the follow-up question, I believe. Is that correct?
Just how to avoid those pitfalls.
Oh yeah. So how we avoided it is by creating a lot of custom automation, and the second part is writing a lot of tests, because tests are a way to ensure that whenever you make changes to your code, that it's not going to affect what the original intent of the code was.
Got it. Okay. And then here's a slightly off-topic question, maybe, but what's your favorite Microsoft product? They're asking.
Favorite Microsoft product? Well, I'm obviously biased because I'm very much involved with PowerShell, and it was my first automation language that I really got into. So for me, that would be PowerShell.
Okay, cool. And then when it comes to getting started with Rubrik, what's kind of the easiest path? People don't have to buy or do a POC with a very large hardware appliance. Is there a easy way for them to kind of try it out or do a POC with Rubrik?
So POC is generally if you reach out to one of our salespeople, then a POC would be possible. Another option would be that to get a software license for a single what we call an edge appliance. And then you can test out the functionality and see what the UI looks like, and start initiating some of the backups and seeing what kind of benefits we bring.
Good, nice. And then to clarify here, there's another question they're asking: can Rubrik protect my data that's in the public cloud, or does it just take data from on-premises and store it in the public cloud? How does that work?
Actually, the answer is both. So we can take the on-premises data, and we can either replicate it to the cloud and use the cloud as just storage, but we can also spin it up into the cloud. So then we do something that we call a cloud conversion, and we convert the offline images to something that Azure understands. But we can also protect Azure workloads. There's a number of workloads that we support, and there's also support for Office 365. So we can back up OneDrive and a number of other Office 365 tools.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have in our live Q&A session. But a really great presentation, Jaap. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Yeah, thank you very much, and have a great day.
For more information on Rubrik, check out the Handouts tab right there, and that will take you to the Rubrik.com website. And there's a ton more resources there, including information on the Rubrik Data Security Summit. You can, of course, contact sales from there and sign up and get more information on doing a POC to see how it could help you. And now it's time for our second gift card announcement. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Amanda Sekerke from New Jersey. Congratulations, Amanda from New Jersey. Still another gift card to announce on the event today, so make sure you stay tuned. And now I'm excited to introduce our next presenter on today's EcoCast, welcoming Mr. W. Curtis Preston, Chief Technical Evangelist at Druva. Curtis, are you there?
I am here.
Always great to have you on, Curtis. Take it away.
All right, thanks a lot. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to may be. Greetings from sunny Southern California, where it's not doing too bad today. So we're going to talk about Microsoft 365. Just a quick note for anybody who missed this announcement. It formerly known as Office 365 has now been rebranded Microsoft 365. And that includes, Microsoft Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive, Teams, and all of those things. That is now referred to as Microsoft 365. So we want to talk about backing up Microsoft 365, and the big part initially here is for me to make the case for doing that, because not everybody believes or understands that there is a need to back up Microsoft 365. So first, I'll just say that there have been a lot of stories, in the previous year or so that illustrates the need to back up SaaS services in general. And also things like file synchronization services like Dropbox and OneDrive. And I have made the case for a long time, not just Microsoft 365. This really has nothing to do, my opinion on this has nothing to do with, being pro or against Microsoft 365 or pro or against some other SaaS service. This comes from, the core idea that Microsoft 365, as well as other SaaS services like Salesforce, G Suite, GitHub, whatever, any of these services where data is being created and stored in someone else's computers, these are I have yet to find an exception to the following statement. Backup and recovery services, or anything that I would define as backup and recovery services, are simply not included in the offerings that are available from the company, and we'll get to that in a minute. But there have been all of these stories, and what I've been waiting for, and I've been sort of predicting, there have been stories that really drive home the point on other platforms, like G Drive, for example. There was a company, a Bay Area company, that basically ceased to exist because they stored their entire company's intellectual property in G Drive. They were a very cloud-centric company. There's a lot of companies like this these days. They store their company's entire intellectual property in G Drive, and then someone accidentally deleted the G Drive account. Right? It was a well-meaning administrator. He thought he was deleting a test domain. He ended up deleting the production domain. And the response from Google was, so sad, too bad. There are no backups of your data. The company sued Google. Good luck with that, because it's right in your service contract. That or more specifically, there are no. There's nothing in your service contract that says they're responsible for the backups of your data. And stuff happened with Salesforce, and where there's actually a story where Salesforce, the company, actually made a mistake and corrupted some permission data of thousands of customers, and Salesforce was responsible to tell the customers to fix it. As amazing as that is, but that's a story that happened about a year ago. And I've been predicting that at some point, someone's going to do something really bad in Microsoft 365 that will, illustrate that Microsoft 365 is no different. And I was correct. It eventually happened. And I'm referring to this in the middle here. You see this story from the Register. IT blunder permanently erases 145,000 users' personal chats. What happened? So KPMG, huge company, and obviously they had somebody at their company who understands, Microsoft 365. So they were using the feature that many people who think they don't need to back up Microsoft 365 sort of tout as why, and that is, it's called retention policy. So you could specify, it's a feature that actually most Microsoft 365 customers don't use, but you can go in and you can say every email, every file in OneDrive, every SharePoint version of file, whatever, is retained for X number of days, months, years. Deleted files, created files, whatever. It basically, you can even enact a feature that says that you can't even undo that. There are reasons why that's problematic, but this is the feature. It's called retention policies. So KPMG had a retention policy that said that all private chats and Teams are retained for X number of months, let's say 90 days. And then they had one user that they wanted to delete that user's private chats. Now, it doesn't go into the reasons as to why KPMG wanted to delete this particular user's private chats. We can only guess. I'm sure it was something. It only makes sense that it was something salacious. It doesn't make sense why you would go through this trouble to delete a user's chat if it wasn't something that would be embarrassing or whatever. But we don't know that. So for whatever reason, they needed to delete this user's private chats. But the user's private chats were part of the company's retention policy that said that all private chats are kept for, let's say, 90 days. So here's what you do. You create a new retention policy, and then you move the user who you want to delete, and the new retention policy says, no retention. And then you move the user that you want to delete into the new retention policy, thus deleting all of the, his previous chats. Except that's not what they did. They created the new policy, and they accidentally, because the buttons are right next to each other, they accidentally sent the 145,000 other users that they didn't want to delete into the, the retention policy that basically immediately deleted all chat history from all, essentially all KPMG employees except for the one that they meant to delete. As ironic as that is, they of course contacted Microsoft, and Microsoft's response was, of course, I'm sorry, there is no backup of that data. And it just illustrates my point that retention policies are nice, they're helpful, they're good for e-discovery purposes. There's a long list of reasons of why they are not a backup and recovery tool, and this is a perfect example. Is a well-meaning administrator can push a few buttons and either accidentally or maliciously just wipe out the entire company's data. And that is, that story illustrates better than any other story the need to back up this data. There's also been this issue of the remote workforce, that the fact that that everyone is working remote, that this hasn't alleviated these concerns. If anything, it has exacerbated the concerns, because Microsoft 365 has had a boon in business. A lot of people, basically they had a cloud initiative, and it was maybe shelved, and then they said, you know what, inter-employee communication is really critical. We're going to take that project, and we're going to move off of Exchange, and we're going to move into Microsoft 365. So they did that, but the problem hasn't gone away, right? If anything, you now have a bunch of remote employees that are now outside the company's firewall that previously they didn't. And so as a result, the security concerns and the ability of a hacker to potentially, attack your Microsoft 365 account has actually gone up since the days of COVID. And again, this isn't an anti-Microsoft message. Any person, there's a number of things that could happen here, right? So there could be a vulnerability on Microsoft 365. There have been 2 or 3 in my memory in the last few years, 2 or 3 security vulnerabilities that were announced that, if leveraged, a black hat or a bad actor, as they say, could use to gain administrative privileges on Microsoft 365. Yes, that's one way that can happen. Another way that can happen is a phishing attempt to gain, the user credentials of someone who is a valid administrator, right? And then basically, which is why, by the way, it's really important to have third-party authentication locked in. And then, of course, the third one could be a rogue administrator, and that's the one that's the tough, either a rogue or just, for lack of a better word, bumbling administrator, right? And that's the one that is the hardest to protect from, because if you have valid credentials and you just do something either malicious or just, bad, stupid, like what happened, with KPMG, it was a simple, accidental click of the mouse. He clicked one button instead of the other button, and boom, he wipes out 145,000, users' messages. That's the one that's hardest to protect from. And so, but let me just come back to the retention policies. The thing is that retention is not backup, right? It's just, really all it is setting a flag. If you think of Microsoft 365, it's a giant application, and really just a giant database, essentially. It's a very nice user interface in front of what is essentially, in the back end, a very fancy, purpose-driven database, right? That database, when you delete an email, or you make a new version of a file, and then there's the previous version of the file, or you delete a file, that previous version of the email or deleted email or whatever, when you have a retention policy, or if what we're talking about is like the recycle bin, all that happens is it sets a flag on that record that says this record is going to be kept for a little bit longer. It doesn't put that record anywhere. It just sets a flag on the record so that the record doesn't show up in your user interface. The record's still sitting there in the same database. That's retention. That's not backup. That is just other records in the database, right? OneDrive itself, also not a backup. OneDrive is a thing to be backed up, not a backup, right? The thing that some people are thinking about, this is more outside of the scope of this, but what some people are thinking about is they think they need to back up their laptop, which I do think many companies, if not most companies, do need to back up their company's laptops. And they say, well, we're just going to use OneDrive. We're going to tell users to put their data in OneDrive, and then that'll sync up. And the thing is, that's not a backup either, for a lot of reasons. The biggest of which is that there's no centralized reporting and monitoring that synchronization process actually happened. And users on the receiving end can defeat this quote-unquote backup process in a number of ways, the biggest of which is they just have to not put data in the OneDrive folder, and then poof, it's not going to get synchronized. They could also disable the OneDrive, the OneDrive application. So that's OneDrive. Versioning also. Versioning is really just another word for retention, also not backup. Recycle bin, same thing. These are all just various ways to say that I'm going to keep the data longer than the user needs it to keep for the purposes of retention or potentially e-discovery, but not for backup. And why doesn't it matter? Why are none of these things backup? And it's the 3-2-1 rule, which is the basic, for those of you unfamiliar with this rule, is the E equals MC squared of backup. And that is that you you need at least 3 versions of your data on 2 different media, one of which is somewhere else. All of the stuff built into Microsoft 365, the retention policies, the recycle bin, the versioning, all of that stuff, it complies with the 3 part, but it doesn't comply with the 2 or the 1 because all of the data is being kept in the same database, right? You would never do this with any other database, right? Think of any other database that you have, and if you, instead of deleting records in the database, you would just flag those records as not being deleted. Would you think of that as a backup? The answer is no. You need to back up that server to another piece of media, right? And then that media needs to be then put very far away from that server in case that server catches fire or blows up or gets flooded. You need the backup somewhere else. That's what the 1 is. So how are additional records in a database that are just flagged for deletion or retention, how does that in any way comply with the 3-2-1 rule? And it doesn't, right? It's just retention. It is not backup. And if you look at, there's a variety of statements from Microsoft, over the years that, they either refer to exterior backups or, you see in the documentation that Exchange Online does not provide a way to perform a traditional backup of mailboxes, right? That they will protect against some type of ransomware attacks, but not all type of ransomware attacks, right? And so really, even and by the way, if you don't believe me, if you're a non-believer here, just please go look at your service agreement for Microsoft 365 or G Suite or Salesforce. Pick your favorite SaaS product. Look for the section that's on backup. Look for anything in your service agreement that mentions that they're going to back up your data. Don't confuse availability with backup. You will find sections about availability. That's availability of the service, not availability of your data, right? You won't find a section on data protection, on backup, on recovery, on restore. You won't find those words anywhere in your service agreement for Microsoft 365. The famous, things of I'll eat my hat if you can find that. So if you're going to solve this, if you're going to solve this challenge, you need a solution that satisfies a number of things. You want to make sure the data is available, right? Reliable backup and rapid recovery. You want to make sure that it's protected from ransomware. You also want to do e-discovery. And then also you want to be able to do compliance against that to make sure, for example, that you comply with GDPR or CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act, that says that, you shouldn't be, for example, you shouldn't be storing social security numbers or passport details in a spreadsheet on a laptop. A good backup product would notice things like that and let you know. So addressing those challenges is Druva for Microsoft 365. So we have a solution that protects Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive, and Teams. And by the way, just a little thing on there, the thing that happened with KPMG was specifically with private chats. And to my knowledge, we are the only company that actually can protect private chats. Microsoft does not provide an API to get private chat information, but we figured out where they are stored, and we're going in and getting them basically direct. We're grabbing them manually. And to my knowledge, we're the only company so far that has actually figured out how to do that. And it's a consistent experience. If we actually have other products that protect, Microsoft 365. We do laptops, mobile devices like iPhones and Androids and tablets and things like that. We do AWS, we do data center backup recovery, we do disaster recovery, we do e-discovery, and you get a consistent experience across all of the products that we offer, right? You can do automatic backup policies, granular restore. You can either restore the entire thing, you can restore everything from the entire account to an individual email. It also does compliance. So, for example, you can specify that, just like I said, if you are subject to like CCPA or GDPR, you can say, we have a template that says turn it on and let me know if anybody stores any sensitive information on their laptops. and it will just automatically start doing that. And then if you get notified, you can then immediately remediate that problem. It's a radically simple experience. It's a SaaS offering. If you're going to protect Microsoft 365, there's no hardware or software installed. You just need to authenticate, our system to their system. It's a single authentication, and then you either protect all the accounts or you select accounts, and then boom, everything happens in the background, cloud to cloud, right? It's automatic. We're constantly updating the product twice a month. No touch feature updates, meaning there's no software for you to upgrade it. You just get the new features as they come. That is a true SaaS experience, right? And we have the most stringent privacy and security standards that I'm aware of, right? The data is encrypted both in rest and in motion. We use envelope encryption, which allows you to encrypt all of the data without having to manage keys. I don't have time to go into that detail, but happy to answer any questions about that. We are GovCloud and FedRAMP certified. If there's anybody on the webinar that is interested in that. And number one thing, most important, is that we have no access to your data. There's a couple of things here. You can attend a demo. We have Demo Tuesdays. We do a free trial, and there's also a bunch of additional resources. And with that, I'll hand things back to David.
Absolutely, yeah, great presentation, Curtis. I really do appreciate that. Let's see, there's a question here that came in. First one I wanted to bring up. Actually, before I forget, let me bring up the poll question for everyone out there. It says, what additional information would you like about the Druva solution? And we'll just leave that up while we take some questions. So first question that comes in, they're asking about when you back up the private chats, how can that data get restored, or is that even possible today?
Yeah, so we barely have figured out how to grab it. Just being incredibly blunt, Microsoft provides no APIs to restore either private chats or public chats, and so we're grabbing it for two reasons. One is for e-discovery purposes. We cannot directly restore those private chats. They actually see this as a point of pride, as some sort of security feature. We can restore like files and wikis and things that are part of the chats. What we can't do is restore the messages themselves, but we can present that information to you, right? So we can present you a web page where basically you can view the private chats. So it's still going to be an impact if someone did like what KPMG, but at least you would have the data for e-discovery purposes, and you would be able to access older chat versions. And hopefully we will be, we're continuing to work with Microsoft. Hopefully we'll be able to change the API issue so that we'll be able to restore it in the future.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, and congrats on being the only company out there that can even back up private chats. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment.
As far as I know, right? I'll put out that big. Yeah. I hate it when I hear companies go, "We're the only ones to do this." But like I said, as far as I know, we're the only ones that figured it out so far.
Right. Let's see. Another question here. They're asking. I know this is about Microsoft, but can you guys back up Google Suite as well?
Yes, we also do Google Suite. And by the way, they recently rebranded. It's now called something else, but like literally 2 or 3 days ago, I forgot what they made it a whole new name. But yes, we do G Suite.
Excellent. And then what about backing up virtualization hosts like VMware? Is that possible? There's a question here about that. Yeah, so we do a lot of things, right? So, this is about Microsoft 365, but yeah, we do Microsoft 365, G Suite, Salesforce, Slack, and we also back up laptops and mobile devices. We do all of that. We also back up AWS resources, right? So everything from EC2 to things like Redshift and DynamoDB, things like that, native AWS resources. And then also we have an entire suite of products for the data center. So we back up VMware, Hyper-V, file servers, Windows servers, Linux servers, and also SQL Server and Oracle are two applications that we protect directly. With regards to VMware, we also do a DRaaS service for VMware that we can do a fully automated recovering your entire data center up into a VPC in the cloud, and we support an RTO of 15 to 20 minutes and an RPO of 1 hour. Got it. And then when getting the data back, I know this is always a question that comes up around when you put data into the cloud for data protection. What about the cost to get it back?
So there's never any, I think what the person is asking about is like egress charges. So there are other solutions that are on the market where you buy a product or license a product and you run it in your cloud account. When you do that, you will experience variation in costs. And one of the variations of cost that you have is when you go to do a restore, you have a giant, egress of data out of, in this case, Amazon, into your account. And you end up getting a giant bill. In our system, we are a full SaaS service. The service runs in our AWS account, which means we incorporate all of those charges, right? So short version is the charge is the same. We charge on the Microsoft 365. There is a per user license based on the number of users you're protecting, because that's how this market tends to do. On the data center side, we charge per deduplicated gigabyte, and that is a charge that doesn't change regardless of how many restores that you do. There's no egress charges or anything like that.
Very nice. And then what about when it comes to restores? Is it possible to do self-service restore?
Yes. I'll just give you, that is an option for the customer to just turn that on or turn that off. Nice.
And so since this is an all software product, I assume it would be relatively easy to try out. Can you kind of walk us through the options?
Yeah, it's literally like, especially with Microsoft 365, right? So if what you want to do, it's easy to do a free trial, right? So you work with us, we'll set you up, and then literally to back up Microsoft 365, it takes a couple of minutes, because all you have to do is provide the authentication from you log into our system, you say you want to do Microsoft 365, it directly takes you where you need to put the appropriate authentication credentials. You do the authentication, and then boom, you're presented with an interface of, okay, which accounts do you want to protect? And if you just want to try it, you just select one account and then go, and then that's it. You're now backing up. You're now backing up Microsoft 365. So doing a free trial of Microsoft 365 is super easy. If you're talking the data center side, it takes a little bit more time, because if you're going to back up vCenter or Hyper-V, there's an OVA that you need to install so that we can interface directly to vCenter. But other than that, the process is not much harder. There's never any hardware or like backup servers to install or maintain anywhere.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds super easy to get started. I think that's all the time we have for our Q&A, but Curtis, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you.
Always good to be here.
And thank you to Druva for supporting today's event. Check out the URL that's right there in the Handouts tab. That'll take you to the Cloud Architect's Guide to Microsoft 365 Backup. Great resource. You don't want to miss out on that one before you go, because we are about to wrap up today's EcoCast. We've got one more prize announcement, and that is an Amazon $500 gift card going to Sean O'Day from Texas. Congratulations, Sean O'Day from Texas. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the 10 on Tech podcast. It's over in the iTunes store to stay up to date on the latest and greatest in IT in just 10 minutes. If you are a potential sponsor of an upcoming EcoCast or MegaCast event and like to chat with us about presenting, just reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And finally, I hope that you'll join us next week for another big event. We'll be hosting the Cloud Strategies and Solutions MegaCast with Druva. We'll be back again, as well as Rubrik, but we'll also hear from Veeam, Nutanix, and a new presenter, new sponsor from OutSystems. Hope to see you on that event. I hope that you learned a lot on today's EcoCast on supporting Microsoft-centric environments. I know I did. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.